The scream tore through the canyon like a hawk's cry, startling even the horses tethered below the ridge. Chayton rose from his crouch, muscles taut, the war paint on his chest catching in the lantern's weak glow. He had been alone for 3 days in these rocks, tracking shadows and whispers of his brother's killers, when the sound came a woman's scream, desperate and raw, rolling down the stone walls as if the earth itself cried out. Then she appeared. Eliya Morgan stumbled out of the dark mouth of the cottonwoods, tripping over roots, half falling into the clearing where his fire smoldered low. She was 30, though the night had aged her 10 more years. Her face was streaked with dust and tears, her lip was split, her shawl half hanging from one shoulder. The hem of her prairie dress was ripped up to the knees, revealing boots cracked with wear, caked in mud. Her dark hair, what had once been neatly braided, was tangled and matted with sweat, but it was her trembling hands that caught him still. She clutched something as though it burned her skin. Her fingers shook as she raised it into the light. Her voice, hoarse and cracking, broke the silence. I took it off. Please. In her palm lay a silver cross dangling from a broken chain. It gleamed red in the firelight, its edges dark with blood. Chayton froze. His lungs seemed to close. His brother's face flashed before him, eyes open and empty under the sycamore tree. That very cross pressed into his dying hand. His throat tightened as the desert wind pushed against him, hot and dry, whispering vengeance. Eliya staggered forward, her breath ragged. They forced it on me, she gasped. Pinned it around my neck, like I was their mule. They said it would draw you here. Said I'd be the bait. Her voice broke and she dropped to her knees in the dust, clutching the chain like it weighed 100 pounds. Chayton's hand went to the knife at his hip. His people believed in signs, omens carried in blood and silver, and this woman's arrival reeked of both. She might be the snare that finished what the white militias had started, but her eyes green as prairie, grass after rain met his. Wide and raw with fear, and something in him hesitated. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. This cross, he growled, voice low, was in my brother's hand the night they cut him down. Her lips trembled. I didn't know. I swear it. They killed my husband too. Left me with this around my neck, laughing. They said you'd come when you saw it. Her hands dropped to her lap, the chain clattering softly against her skirts. I couldn't carry it another step. I'd rather die than wear their mark again. The fire popped. The horses below shifted nervously, ears pricked to the wind out above them. From the canyon rim came the faint echo of hooves. Chayton's head snapped up. Shadows moved against the stars, silhouettes of riders fanning out along the ridge. The militia. The same men who had murdered his brother and now hunted this woman. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her roughly to her feet. She stumbled against his chest, the cross dangling between them like a curse. If they find you here, he hissed, they will kill you slow. And if my people see me protecting you, they will call me traitor. His eyes burned into hers. Tell me why I shouldn't end you myself. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Her corset tight and cruelly lace-strained as she struggled to stand. And then, to his shock, her trembling hands went to the ties. She ripped them loose, tearing the garment off and flinging it to the ground. From within its boning spilled crumpled sheets of parchment maps, letters, marked trails. They hid it inside me, she whispered fiercely, her voice trembling with fury more than fear. They made me carry it like I was nothing. They meant you to find this too. The papers scattered in the dirt between them, lines of ink shimmering in the firelight. Proof of ambushes, supply routes, the militia's secrets. Chayton's pulse thundered in his ears. What she had shed was more than a cursed token, it was a weapon meant to destroy his people dot above them. The riders' voices carried through the night, closing in, and in that terrible instant, Chayton realized the truth. This woman was no simple pawn. She was the fuse in a powder keg, and his next move, mercy or death, would decide whether the canyon burned before dawn. The night pressed heavy against the canyon walls, the kind of silence that made even the owls hush. Eliya's breath came quick and shallow as Chayton dragged her deeper into the shadows, one hand locked tight around her wrist. The silver cross dangled from his other hand, glinting red in the firelight before he shoved it into the folds of his belt. Her knees nearly buckled as he pulled her along, the loose dirt sliding under her boots. She tried to steady herself, but the exhaustion in her body screamed louder than the fear. At last he spun her to face him, pinning her back against the cold stone of the canyon wall. His hand shot up to her throat, not squeezing yet but firm enough to remind her who held her life. Chayton's dark eyes bore into hers, the fire in them brighter than the flames behind. "Speak truth, woman," he hissed, his voice deep and rough, words heavy with an accent sharpened by rage. "Why do you carry my brother's blood upon you?" Her lips parted, trembling. "I told you I didn't know. They killed him. They killed my husband too." He leaned closer, his breath hot against her cheek. "And yet you walk into my fire with his death token? With their maps hidden in your corset? You expect me to believe you are no part of them?" The papers still lay scattered in the dust behind them, ink catching the glow of the fire. Eliya's eyes flicked toward them, then back to him. "They made me carry it. I was a snare," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They said you'd find me, that you'd come for the cross. And when you did, they'd be waiting. I'm not their ally. I'm their bait." The word bait hung in the air, foul as rot. For a long moment, Chayton said nothing. His jaw flexed, the muscles in his arm tightening where it held her still. She could see the fury warring inside him, the hatred for the men above who laughed at such cruelty, and the suspicion that she might still be playing some deeper game. A stone tumbled from the ridge above. Both their heads snapped upward. Voices drifted down, low and cruel. The militia was spreading out, searching. Chayton's grip on her throat eased, but his eyes never softened. He stepped back, letting her breathe, then bent to snatch the scattered maps from the dirt. He shook them open, his gaze scanning the crude markings. His teeth clenched. Supply routes. Trails through the canyon. Ambush points marked with sharp X's. It wasn't just bait. It was war. Eliya hugged her arms around herself, shaking. The shawl had slipped off her shoulders, leaving her shivering in the chill. "I didn't ask for this," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "I begged them to leave me, but they laughed. Sighed I was too useful. Said my tears would be worth more than my life." She looked up at him, eyes shining with a mix of fear and defiance. "If you think me guilty, then strike me down. But know this, those men above want you dead more than they ever wanted me." Chayton's hand hovered near his knife, the firelight dancing on the blade. For a moment, Eliya thought he might do it, might end her right there and leave her body as another whisper in the canyon. But then he turned sharply, scanning the shadows. The hoofbeats above grew louder. One of the riders barked in order, and gravel rained down from the rim. They were coming. Chayton cursed low in his own tongue. He grabbed Eliya's wrist again, but this time with less fury, more urgency. "If you stay here, you die. If I leave you, you die slower." He tugged her toward the narrow gap in the stone where the canyon bent into darkness. She stumbled after him, barely keeping pace, her skirts catching on the jagged rocks. "Then why save me?" She gasped out. He didn't look back. "Because vengeance without truth is poison. And your tears? They do not lie." The words struck her harder than his grip. She bit her lip to keep from crying, though the tears burned her eyes. She had thought she was finished, that death would come in the dust of the canyon. Instead, she was being pulled into its heart, tethered to a man who could kill her as easily as he might protect her. The canyon narrowed into a passage. the air damp and cold. Chayton's footsteps were silent as a predator's, but Eliya stumbled, her boots scraping on stone. He stopped once, turning to steady her, his strong hand briefly brushing her arm. Even in the chill, his touch was hot, searing through her fear. Behind them, the riders' torches lit the rim, orange eyes peering into the dark. Voices echoed, harsh and eager. Chayton pushed Eliya forward into the blackness. "Stay close. Make no sound. Tonight, the canyon hunts us both." The fire crackled low, sending thin smoke into the canyon air. The woman, her name was Eliza, clutched at her throat where Dakota's hand had been moments before. The red mark still burned, but it wasn't just her skin that ached, it was the weight of the situation. She had thought she was clever, thought she could escape the chaos of town by slipping into the canyon with her maps and her plans. But fate had led her into the arms of an Apache warrior, one whose eyes burned with a rage as deep as the land itself. Dakota stood only a few feet away now, his chest heaving as he studied her. His breathing was slow, deliberate, like a wolf deciding whether to attack or let the prey run. His long black hair shimmered in the faint glow of firelight, and the tribal jewelry across his neck and wrists jingled softly with each movement. For the first time since their encounter, his voice broke the silence. "You carry papers," he said, pointing to the scattered maps. His voice was deep, commanding, touched with an accent that turned each English word into a low growl. "Why?" Eliza swallowed hard. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "There, roots, trails, water sources. Nothing more." Dakota's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, crouched low, and lifted one of the maps. His fingers traced the inked lines, following the rivers and canyons. Then his gaze shot back to her, sharp and accusing. "These are not for travel," he said firmly. "These are for soldiers." Eliza's lips parted, but no words came out. He wasn't wrong. The maps were drawn with too much detail, too much precision for a simple traveler. They were meant for the militia, the same militia whose torches still flickered faintly along the canyon rim above them. I had no choice," she whispered finally, the truth spilling out like water from a cracked jar. "They forced me. Said if I didn't chart the trails for them, they'd burn my father's land. He's too old to fight them." Dakota's expression shifted, though only slightly. His eyes softened, but his jaw stayed tight. He stood tall again, towering over her, the firelight painting his muscular frame in shades of bronze and shadow. "You help men who bring death," he said coldly. "You draw paths for them to find my people. Women, children. Do you understand what you have done?" Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She looked away, tears blurring her vision. Shame curled through her stomach like a knife. "I didn't want to," she said weakly. "I only wanted to protect what's left of my family." Dakota stared at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, he threw the map back onto the fire. The paper caught quickly, curling into black ash. Eliza gasped. "You will not give them more," Dakota said firmly, his voice like stone. "If they take your land, then it is gone. But if you give them these paths, they will take my people's lives." Which is worse? The question hit her like a blow. She opened her mouth, but the answer wouldn't come. She couldn't admit what she feared most, that perhaps she had already chosen wrong. Above them, a horse whinnied. The militia riders were close now, their torches glowing brighter against the canyon rim. Eliza looked up at them in panic. "They'll find us," she hissed, clutching her shawl tightly. Dakota turned his head, listening. Then he crouched low again, his movements like that of a predator in tall grass. "Not if you move quiet," he said. His eyes flashed back to her. "And you will move with me. Do not try to run. Before she could protest, he seized her wrist and pulled her into the shadows beyond the fire. The canyon walls loomed tall around them, and the narrow path they followed wound like a serpent deeper into the earth. Eliza stumbled behind him, her legs trembling with every step. She hated the way his grip was both painful and protective, hated that she had no control over where this night would take her. Yet deep inside, another feeling flickered, something that felt dangerously close to trust. As the fire behind them died into embers, the sound of militia voices echoed faintly through the canyon. Dakota led her further from them, deeper into a world she did not know, and though fear still held her heart, Eliza couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this warrior wasn't her captor, but her only chance of survival. Eliya hadn't realized how cold the desert night could cut until the wind rushed through the canyon like a blade. Her shawl clung uselessly to her shoulders, half torn, her breath leaving faint clouds in the moonlight. The Apache still stood before her, Chayton, his body rigid, his dark eyes unreadable. For what felt like an eternity, neither spoke. Only the crackling fire between them gave the canyon a pulse. When at last he moved, it was sudden. He stooped low, sweeping the scattered maps and papers from the dirt and fanning them out in his calloused hands. His sharp gaze traced every line of ink, every scribbled note. The papers were marked with trails, creeks, wagon routes, and on one page, a red circle bled across the page like a wound. Eliya knew what it meant even before he lifted his eyes to her. Ambush, he said, his voice low, his accent shaping the word like stone against stone. Eliya's knees weakened. She swallowed, trying to force the truth past her dry throat. They forced me. I had to carry it. Her hand trembled toward the necklace, the blood-stained cross now lying in the dirt where she'd ripped it free. They used me as bait. They wanted you to find me. Chayton's gaze burned. For an instant, she thought he would strike her, his hand clenched around the paper so tightly it tore. But then, just as suddenly, his shoulders eased, his eyes shifting toward the canyon rim. The faint glow of torches flickered there, growing brighter, closer. They come, he muttered. Eliya's heart leapt into her throat. You don't understand. They'll kill us both. Chayton's expression hardened into something unreadable. He folded the torn map sharply and tucked it into his belt. Then he snatched up his bow, sliding an arrow into his palm so quickly Eliya barely saw the motion. His chest rose and fell with a controlled rhythm, the way a predator breathes before the strike. You should run, she whispered. He turned his gaze back to her, fierce and unwavering. And leave you? Then I am no better than them. The word struck her harder than the desert wind. No one had spoken of her survival in days, not even herself. She'd been a pawn, a decoy, a woman too worn and broken to matter. Yet here stood a man, half her enemy, deciding her life had weight. From the canyon rim above, voices echoed. A man laughed, cruel and certain. She'll lead us right to him, the voice called down. The savage will be ours before the moon sets. Eliya flinched at the word, shame curling in her stomach. She dared a glance at Chayton. His jaw tightened, but his eyes did not leave hers. You will follow me, he said, as though it were not a request but a command. Keep close. Do not speak. Before she could answer, he caught her wrist and pulled her into the shadows beyond the firelight. His grip was firm, not cruel, and in that grip Eliya felt the first tether of something she had thought long dead, hope. They wove between jagged rocks, the moonlight painting silver edges on the stone. Chayton moved like smoke, silent, sure-footed, his muscles rippling as he guided her along a narrow ledge. Below them, the fire guttered and hissed in the breeze, the last mark of where they had been. Behind, torches descended into the canyon. Voices grew louder, boots grinding stone. Eliya dared a backward glance and nearly cried out. She saw at least 6 riders dismounting, rifles in their hands, their eyes fixed on the canyon floor. "They'll find the fire," she whispered. Chayton halted, his body a shadow against the moon. He turned, leaning close enough that she felt the heat of his breath on her cheek. "Then we make them follow fire, not us." Before she could ask, he tugged something from a pouch at his side, a small bundle wrapped in hide. With quick, practiced hands, he struck flint against stone. The spark caught, and soon he pressed the bundle into a crevice of dry brush. Within moments, flames licked upward, feeding greedily. He lit another, farther along the ledge, and another, until the canyon began to glow with false trails of fire. The torches below faltered. Men shouted, their confusion carrying through the dark. Eliya clung to the rock wall, staring at Chayton in awe. His eyes reflected the firelight, hard and untamed. She realized then that this man was no savage. He was a strategist, a survivor, and he had just chosen her survival as fiercely as his own dot as the militia's shouts echoed, and the canyon filled with smoke. Chayton caught her hand once more and pulled her deeper into the labyrinth of stone. For the first time in days, Eliya felt the faintest spark of belief. Maybe she wasn't running to her death. Maybe, just maybe, she was running towards something else entirely. The fires Chayton lit had bought them time, but not much. The militia were hunters by trade, and smoke carried like a beacon in the desert night. Eliya followed close behind him as they weaved deeper into the canyon, her breath sharp in her lungs, her boots scraping against stone. Every sound felt magnified, the hiss of brush, the trickle of sand, the echo of men shouting in the distance. At last, Chayton drew her into a hollow beneath a leaning slab of rock. He crouched low, his chest gleaming with sweat, his long black hair spilling forward as he pressed his ear to the ground. Eliya held her breath, watching him, her own pulse hammering. He looked like part of the canyon itself, raw, unyielding, carved by survival. "They split," he said, voice no louder than the wind. "2 follow fire. 4 follow us." Eliya's stomach dropped. "4?" Her voice cracked before she could control it. His dark eyes met hers, steady, grounding. "4 men are just men," he said. "Not spirits. Not gods." But his words didn't hide the truth. 4 rifles against 1 bow. And Eliya, unarmed, trembling, dragging him down. She wanted to say she'd slow him, that he should leave her, but the thought of being abandoned, of being left to those men, turned her blood cold. So instead, she said the only thing she could. "Then we don't let them catch us." Something flickered across Chayton's face. Approval, perhaps, though it passed quickly. He leaned forward, pulling a long knife from his belt, its blade glinting faintly in the moonlight. He turned it in his hand, then, without warning, pressed it into hers. Eliya froze, staring at the weapon. Its weight was foreign, frightening. I can't." "You can," he said firmly. His voice carried no softness, but there was certainty in it. "If they take you, you will use it." Her throat tightened. "I'm not a killer." "Then you live," Chayton replied, his gaze unwavering. "And if you want to live, you fight." The knife trembled in her grasp. For the first time since this nightmare began, she realized he saw her as more than bait. He saw her as someone who could choose. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed close, boots on gravel, men cursing under their breath. Eliya's heart lurched. Chayton leaned close, whispering into her ear, "Stay low, stay silent." Then he slipped into the shadows, bow in hand, as fluid and silent as a cougar. Eliya crouched deeper into the hollow, clutching the knife so tightly it bit into her palm. She forced her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the sliver of canyon beyond. Torches flickered, shadows stretched. And soon she saw them, 2 men, rifles slung low. Moving cautiously, then it happened, a whisper of motion. A flash of muscle, and one man fell with an arrow in his throat before he could even shout. The other spun, rifle lifting, too slow. Chayton was already upon him, driving him into the rock with brutal force. The rifle clattered, the man howled, and the canyon erupted with noise. From farther off, voices answered. The rest were coming. Eliya's blood iced. She gripped the knife, her breath ragged. She should stay hidden, she told herself. Let Chayton fight. He was the warrior. She was nothing, but a shadow fell across her. She whipped around just in time to see the glint of steel. One of the militia had circled wide, moving behind while the others charged ahead. He loomed over her, knife raised, his teeth bared in a cruel grin. Eliya's scream stuck in her throat. Her body acted before her mind caught up. She thrust the blade upward, wild, desperate. The man's eyes widened as the knife found flesh. His grunt tore the silence as he staggered back, clutching his side. Eliya scrambled, hands slick, breath ragged. She hadn't killed him, not yet, but she had stopped him. Chayton's bow sang again, an arrow slicing the air. The man dropped, silenced forever. The canyon fell still but for the distant pounding of boots, closer now, closing in. Eliya gasped for breath, staring at her bloodied hands. She expected shame, horror. But instead, she felt something else stirring, not triumph, but survival. She looked at Chayton as he knelt beside her, his face unreadable in the moonlight. You fought, he said simply. Tears burned her eyes, but she held his gaze. I did. The faintest flicker of respect crossed his expression. He touched her wrist briefly, not gently, but firmly, grounding her. Then he rose, stringing another arrow. Then we may live yet. And together, side by side, they melted once more into the shadows, two hunted souls bound now by blood and survival. The canyon narrowed into a throat of stone, the walls climbing higher, the night air tightening like a noose. Eliya stumbled after Chayton, her breath ragged, the knife still slick in her hand. Her legs ached, her dress clung with dust and sweat, but she pushed on. Because stopping meant death. Above them, torches flared like false stars. Voices barked orders, rifles cracked, the militia were closing in. The smoke from Chayton's false fires drifted like a ghost across the moon, but it wasn't enough now. The hunters had their prey cornered. Chayton stopped abruptly at the canyon's end. Eliya staggered against him, then froze. Before them stretched nothing but empty space. A sheer cliff dropped away into a black abyss, the river far below a faint glimmer under the moonlight. The canyon had swallowed them whole and left no way forward. Her heart plummeted. We were trapped. Chayton didn't answer. His jaw was stone, his eyes scanning the cliffside, the rim above, the shadows around them. He set his bow with calm precision, every movement deliberate. Eliya's hand shook. There's too many. We can't fight them all. Finally, his gaze cut to hers. Then we fight until they stop coming. Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him he was mad, that this was hopeless. But as she stared into his face, lit by the ghostly moon, she realized there was no fear there. Only resolve, the kind that either saved a soul or damned it. The first militiaman appeared at the canyon mouth, torch raised high. His shout echoed like thunder. They're cornered. Others surged in behind him, rifles gleaming. Chayton loosed an arrow. It struck true. The man fell with a cry that split the night. The torch dropped, sputtering in the dirt. Before the body had stilled, another arrow sang, and another man went down clutching his chest, but the canyon flooded with enemies. 6, 7, 8 men now, their rifles lifting, muzzles sparking fire. Bullets slammed into the stone, shards exploding. Eliya dropped low, hard hammering, as Chayton fired again, swift as a storm. Stay down. He barked, his voice cutting through the gunfire, but she couldn't stay still. A militiaman rushed along the sidewall, climbing the rocks to flank them. Eliya saw the gleam of his blade, the shadow of his body rising above. "Chayton!" she cried. He spun too late. The man lunged, and Eliya acted. She surged upward, knife flashing. She struck his arm, the blade sinking deep. He howled, dropping his weapon. Chayton finished him with an arrow through the chest. The warrior's gaze snapped to her, fierce, surprised, almost proud. "Good," he said, and turned back to the fight, but they were being pushed harder now. Bullets whined past, one grazing Chayton's shoulder, leaving a red streak across his bronze skin. He didn't flinch. He knocked another arrow, loosed it, dropped another man. Eliya's blood roared in her ears. She crawled closer, pressing her back to the stone beside him. For a moment, they fought as one, him with bow, her with knife, two figures lit by moon and fire. Holding back a tide of death dot, then a blast shook the cliff. One of the militia fired a rifle at close range, the bullet slamming into the rock above. Fragments rained down, knocking Eliya sideways. She slipped, her foot catching the loose edge of the cliff. The abyss yawned beneath her, black and endless. Her scream tore the night. Chayton dropped his bow, lunging. His hand caught hers just as her body tipped backward. His grip was iron, muscles straining, his teeth bared as he held her back from the edge. Bullets struck the stone around them, but he didn't let go. "Hold," he growled, his eyes blazing into hers. Her heart pounded, her body trembling. She clutched his arm with both hands, tears spilling. "Don't let me go." "I will not," he said, voice like fire and stone. With a final heave, he dragged her onto solid ground, but the militia pressed closer. More torches, more rifles. The canyon echoed with their fury. Chayton rose to his full height, chest heaving, blood streaking his skin. His bow was empty now, arrows spent. Slowly, he drew the knife from his belt, the twin of the one Eliya still held, side by side. They faced the darkness, the cliff at their backs. Their enemies before them. Eliya's breath shook, but her grip tightened on the blade. For the first time, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like a fighter, and as the militia surged forward, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. If death came tonight, it would not find her begging. It would find her standing. Gunfire split the night like lightning. The canyon roared with echoes, torches sputtered, and the air reeked of smoke and blood. Eliya stood shoulder to shoulder with Chayton, knives in hand, her heart slamming against her ribs. Every breath tasted of iron and fear. The cliff yawned behind them, the militia pressed before them, and there was no path left but through. The first man lunged. Chayton moved like thunder, his blade flashing, carving a brutal arc across the attacker's chest. The man crumpled, his torch falling, hissing against the dirt. Another raised his rifle. Eliya dove, slashing upward, catching his arm. He howled, dropped the weapon, and Chayton finished him with a swift strike, but more came. Bullets sparked against the rock, shards slicing Eliya's cheek. She barely flinched, too deep in the frenzy of survival. Her dress clung to her legs, torn and heavy, her lungs burned, yet still she swung. Fought, lived out at last. A blast of gunpowder deafened the canyon. One of the militia fired point-blank at Chayton. Eliya's scream tore the night as she saw the warrior stagger, blood darkening his side. He gritted his teeth, his body swaying but unbroken. With a roar, he hurled his knife. The steel sank deep into the shooter's chest. For a moment, silence. The smoke curled. The last torch guttered. The survivors faltered, staring at the two figures who would not fall. Enough. One of them shouted. The remaining militia turned, dragging their wounded with them, retreating into the darkness of the canyon. Their boots pounded against the stone, fading until only the whisper of the river below remained. Eliya's knife slipped from her fingers. Her knees buckled, the adrenaline draining all at once. She sank onto the dirt, her breath trembling, tears stinging her eyes. It was over, or at least the night had finally let them love. She turned to Chayton. He was still standing, but barely. Blood streaked his side, soaking into the waistband of his buckskin trousers. His chest heaved, his skin gleamed with sweat, his long black hair clung to his shoulders. Yet his eyes burned steady, fixed on her as though anchoring them both. "You're hurt," Eliya whispered. He sank slowly to one knee, pressing a hand to the wound. "Not the first time." Something inside her broke. Not with despair, but with a desperate will she hadn't known she possessed. She tore what remained of her shawl, pressing it hard against his side, her hands firm though they shook. "You saved me. Now let me save you." Chayton's lips curved faintly, though his eyes were grim. "You already did." Her throat closed. She thought of the knife, of the moment she struck back against death, of the hand he refused to let slip into the abyss. Somehow, between blood and fire, they had become more than hunted and hunter. They had become bound that the night stretched on, heavy and raw. They stayed there until the canyon quieted, until the smoke thinned, until the torches had all guttered out. Eliya worked by instinct, binding his wound as best she could. Whispering prayers she wasn't sure she believed. At last, the sky softened. A faint blush of dawn painted the canyon rim, pale pink against the jagged stone. Birds stirred, timid notes rising over the silence. Eliya sat beside Chayton, her back against the rock, exhaustion pulling at every bone. He leaned against her, his weight solid, grounding. She stared at the sunrise, her eyes burning with tears she could no longer hold back. "We lived," she whispered. Chayton's voice was low, rough. "For now." She turned her head, studying his profile, strong, scarred, unyielding. And yet beneath it, something softer flickered. Something she hadn't expected to find in the eyes of a man the world had called her enemy. Her fingers brushed his hand, tentative, trembling. He didn't pull away. For a long moment, they sat in silence as the desert woke around them. And when the first full rays of dawn broke across the canyon, Eliya knew one truth she could not deny. She had been bait, a pawn, a woman forgotten. But now she was a survivor. And at her side was a warrior who had chosen her life over his own. Whatever lay beyond this canyon, vengeance, redemption, or ruin, they would face it together.